so mesmerizing. Put that as a moving screensaver on your PC. You know, so when you're at work and you feel like killing yourself, you got a little moment to zen.
Radio Free Innsmouth, episode 276. Right around 3 years ago, almost to the day, when I found out Mark Shelton died, I put out a 3-part series on Manilla Road. In the years since, you might have a hard time believing this, but I still really like Manilla Road a whole lot. I know, you're shocked, right?
On second thought, no. Not really, no.
And I mean, why wouldn't I? Manilla Road is total hipster repellent, on par with Nunslaughter in the case of death metal, or Sabbath in the case of black metal. The posers unequivocally hate Manilla Road. Maybe in the intervening years that's changed, I don't know. I try not to talk to people I know I won't like. All I know is I still see people complaining about, I don't like the vocals on Crystal Logic. And last time Manilla Road played here, some goofball tried to get them canceled for racism.
What?
I mean, Manilla Road ain't even racist. It's just, the posers know that Manilla Road is antithetical to everything they stand for. Anyways, I tend to do these episodes about bands I've been listening to a lot lately. And I've been listening to a lot of Manilla Road lately, but it's kind of tricky because it's like, damn, dude, you've already put out nearly an hour's worth of content talking about Manilla Road. Could you possibly have anything more to say about them?
Of course!
Never underestimate my ability to talk about a band, particularly one I enjoy as much as Manilla Road.
But
I'm not going to do your standard discography overview, because one, I already did that 3 years ago, and two, they've got 18 albums, all of which are at least good, and 11 of which are unassailable classics, about each of which you could probably do a whole episode in itself. So instead of that, I decided to get a little bit more intellectual and focus in on particular aspects of Manilla Road's sound. The aspect of Manilla Road's sound, which we will be discussing this week, is their massive space rock influence.
Hold it. I know what you're thinking.
Jub, what the hell is space rock? Isn't that just progressive rock? Well,
yes.
But also,
no.
And it can also kind of be metal, but at the same time, it's not really metal. It might be easier just to show you what the hell space rock is. And the best band to do that with is one of Manilla Road's major influences, Hawkwind. Right off the bat, you can hear why. This is kind of progressive rock and kind of heavy metal, but also kind of not. Whereas heavy metal and even prog rock are all about sequences of musical phrases or riffs being stacked into each other. With Hawkwind, the central idea of the song instead arises out of the coalescing of several layers of noise and sonic textures before it finally emerges with an absolutely brutal rhythm guitar riff. For 1972, that's about the heaviest guitar tone out there. A lot of people just think of Hawkwind as being that band Lemmy was in before he started Motorhead. I believe this does them a massive disservice. I mean, he doesn't even play on this album, and it's one of their best. Honestly, I would rate Hawkwind a lot higher than I would Motorhead.
Take care, Hunter. What you say is heresy.
Although that really is an apples to oranges sort of comparison. They don't sound much alike at all apart from the same basic ingredients of guitar, bass, and drums. As you're hearing right now, there are riffs, but they're a bit fuzzier around the edges than they would be in either prog rock or in metal, if that makes sense. They sort of just gradually wandered into the main melody of the song, and at any point they're fully capable of sort of wandering out of it off into, for lack of a better word, space. The music's constantly spinning off into its own little weird variations that don't really resolve in the same concrete way that riffs do in metal or prog rock. Although there are metal and prog rock bands that have dabbled in this sort of space rock style composition, notably a lot of the German bands from the 70s like Can or Neu or Amandul get really spacey, and in fact a lot of that German progressive rock was a major influence on Hawkwind. You could take it back even farther and say that those German bands were influenced by German classical music that had a very space rock style to it, specifically talking about Wagner with the Vorspiel to Das Rheingold, where you just sort of had these like converging layers of sound that eventually form a melody. In metal, you see this kind of composition cropping up in very surprising places, notably on Therian's second album, Beyond Sanctorum. The 10-minute long song The Way is very space rock in its construction, but most notably, you hear a lot of space rock style songwriting in black metal, particularly with bands that are influenced by Burzum. In fact, if you wanted to piss Varg off, you could accuse him of playing space rock instead of black metal, although I don't know why you want to do that. He seems like a nice enough fella. Just stay away from any staircases, lamps, and knives.
제가 V앱을 너무 안 한다고.
Yeah, I guess a lot of the drone doom guys go into space rock territory too, but I don't really like any of that stuff, and it's my show. I do what I want. that.
That's the problem with having Asperger's. I think with an extra goddamn chromosome in my head, so I'll see things from a different perspective.
But one of the earliest and most notable exponents of space rock composition in a metal context is undoubtedly Manilla Road, particularly on their earliest material, going all the way back to their demos in the 70s, but even more noticeably on their first album, the highly underrated Invasion. You can see, like with that Hawkwind song, they start out building the song from like very simple elemental bits. Like this isn't really riff, it's like a proto thing that sort of is like a riff, and as they add more layers to it, it eventually starts to become less of just the band jamming and more of a metal riff proper. But it takes a long time, and I've sped it up considerably. And there we go, this is the riff proper. But like with that Hawkwind song earlier, it's fuzzier around the edges. There's not a hard line division between them jamming and the actual riff of the song. There's a real sense of liquid motion to it. It keeps spinning off into its own variations and coming back to the center. A lot of people debate whether or not this album even counts as metal. Personally, I think it's just heavy enough and just structured enough to kind of barely squeak in as metal. Whatever it is, it's honestly one of my favorite Manilla Road albums, mostly because of parts like this. You can call that space rock, you can call that metal, psychedelic nonsense, whatever it is. It's honestly beautiful. And hearing them do all this weird shit with it is truly a sight to behold, or a sound to do with your ears, whatever the oral equivalent of beholding is. Obscene sounds, dude.
Wow, man, freak out!
And to have space, you gotta have Earth to provide that dichotomy. And they do come back down to Earth eventually, particularly when they bring the vocals back in like you're hearing right now. But even these more comparatively restrained sections are really just them building another launch pad to shoot back into Hoogie Boogie Land, which means they get to bring back that awesome guitar melody from earlier, and I'm always up for that. One of the coolest, not really a riff, lead guitar lines, solos of all time. I don't even know what to call that. That's what I mean, space rock, real fuzzy around the edges, hard to define exactly what the hell is going on, but when it's done well, I like it a lot. Another thing space rock excels at is taking very primitive, simple, sort of folk music forms and perverting them just enough to make them kind of weird and outer spacey. For instance, the very first song on the very first Hawkwind album, Hurry on Sundown. It starts out relatively normal and happy, but there's this creeping German influence that surfaces, throwing in all these dissonant chords, lending a vague sense of unease to everything. Definitely in line with something a band like Amendoul might do. And yeah, you know, it goes back to being jangly and happy. They even start incorporating some folky shit like a harmonica, but even in its happier moments, there's like a little bit too much reverb on everything. Stuff just seems a bit off. It's hard to explain. It feels like a folk song, yeah, but in the background, there's like nuclear missiles shooting off, rocket ships going into space, aliens coming down. Also, the lyrics are very much,
Dude, this is some good weed.
level acid trip shit. They ain't singing about some girl they like or protesting some political shit I don't give a fuck about. The drums have this weird insistent pulse to it, and it's almost like the guitars are more orbiting around the composition than driving it. It's Hawkwind showing off their roots and that they all started out as essentially street musicians, buskers, but at the same time, you know, they still got all their weird outer space type shit going on. The whole thing kind of has like a Ray Bradbury feel to it. Similarly, Manilla Road, they indulge in a little bit of the wacky, folky space rock shit. They got this song called Centurion War Games on the Invasion album. This one's even more aggressively minimalist than Hurry on Sundown is. And again, it shows off some of Manilla Road's more outside metal influences. In this case, folk rock, but also even a little bit of country stuff, which Mark Shelton has always mentioned in interviews. Almost like an old European folk ballad. However, when the lyrics kick in, they're about all this post-apocalyptic sci-fi stuff. Neo-cybernetic gladiatorial arena type stuff. I really like Mark Shelton's vocals here. Very soulful stuff, especially in the chorus.
Who were centurions in a game of war, fighting for fortune and fame. We're the warriors of a dying race in a centurion war game.
Also, check out this part here with the hand claps. I dig it, man. It's catchy. Like if you were a wacky 60s sci-fi looking spaceman and you put on the soft rock station on your interstellar radio, it'd probably sound like this.
Swords they gleam against the sky that's red with fires of
You know, real
war.
techno-barbarian hours over here. It's one of the biggest strengths for the space rock era of Manila Road is just how much variety they got going on. And their second album was going to be even more space rock sounding. It was entitled Dreams of Eshkatan. They got the whole thing recorded, but they decided they didn't really like it, and they ended up scrapping it for their proper second album, the much more traditional metal sounding album, fittingly just entitled Metal. They did end up reusing the Dreams of Eshkatan song title on their Crystal Logic album, and fittingly enough, that song's by far the most space rock sounding song on said album, because most of the album sounds like classic Manila Road style epic heavy power metal shit. But Dreams of Eshkatan comes on, it's a lot more like real esoteric, super spacey, weird jam freakout shit. And it's pretty fantastic. But luckily, Dreams of Eshkatan, the album, not the song on Crystal Logic, eventually was released in 2002 under the name Mark of the Beast. And we finally got to hear Manila Road doing some more pure space rock stuff. Mark Shelton himself, from what I've seen, really doesn't like the material on this album. He thinks they're doing way too many drugs at the time. But I don't know, man. This is some of my favorite Manila Road shit ever. Just listen to that wacky guitar playing, the inventive use of harmonics. And Mark's vocals on this are fantastic. These weird echoing radio rock emanations from another dimension. The guitar playing feels more like an aura emanating out from those vocals. And those drums are just so fucking smooth. Rick Fisher gives a very different sort of performance from the kind of stuff you'd hear Randy Thrasher Fox doing on the later Manila Road albums like Open the Gates. I honestly love both styles. They're kind of jazzy here, but not in a bad way. More than anything, it's just very smooth and atmospheric. Mark's vocals are absolutely swimming in reverb, but it's like a weird kind of reverb, where the echo of the vocals almost sounds like somebody talking on the phone. I feel like I'm picking up some EVPs or something.
Boo! Haunted house!
Guitars also have this real ghostly feeling to it, utilizing those natural harmonics. His vocals are about to get fucking nuts here, watch out. Perfect way to lead into this crashing wall of heavy guitar noise. This is about as metal as this album gets, and I could definitely see why if you were going from a metal purist angle, you might hate Mark of the Beast. But as I mentioned earlier, it's one of my favorite Manila Road albums. Listening to it never fails to put me, I won't say in a good mood, but definitely in a pleasant mood. Like I don't feel like I want to strangle everybody, which is how I usually feel, especially in traffic. And you'd think, given that their big space rock album went unreleased for years, and they underwent a pretty major style change to pure strain heavy metal immediately after recording it, that there wouldn't be a lot of space rock to Manila Road's later material. But
That's where you're wrong.
because Manila Road is never only one thing. They're never just power metal. They're never just heavy metal. They're never just doom metal. They're never just thrash metal. They're all of those things at once, and that includes space rock. Even 4 albums in, they put in a really spaced out weird epic song, The Ninth Wave, which is actually the song that got me into Manila Road way back when. This one's got a whole lot of weird spooky guitar noise in it, coupled with some odd atmospheric drums. And like the best of space rock, most of it is based around a singular melody crystallizing out of all that noise. A process which takes about 1.5 minutes to get going, but I've sped it up so I don't get hit too hard with the copyright, and so that you don't get bored waiting for something to happen. Interestingly enough, Rob Darkin of Gravelands, which is another black metal band that, like Burzum, employs a lot of space rock sounding composition in their sound, has mentioned Manila Road as a pretty major influence on a lot of the later Graveland albums, and you can definitely hear it on songs like The Ninth Wave. I mean, this stuff almost sounds like Hammerheart era Bathory, way before Bathory was doing anything like that, but also with way more of a fuzzy around the edges, liquid composition, space rock approach to how the songwriting layering goes. Randy Thrasher Fox's drumming on this is about as close as he ever got to Rick Fisher's style from the early Manila Road albums, but even then it's still clearly Randy Thrasher Fox. It has this angrier, almost tribal character to its psychedelia. But the main space rock thing definitely comes from the layers of guitar noise as well as those loping, very long-form, doomy melodies. And those tinges of space rock continue to show up throughout Manilla Road's career, even well into the 2000s. In fact, my favorite post-2000s Manilla Road albums, Spiral Castle and Blessed Curse, both have a lot of space rock going on with them. I mean, Blessed Curse, it's kind of a cheat because the main space rocky stuff on it is in their re-recording of a song they originally wrote in 1981 back in their space rock days. But Spiral Castle is like all new material, and it's super space rocky, probably the heaviest space rock they ever did. Manilla Road actually followed a similar late career trajectory to the band Gargoyle in that their later material tends to be a bit more abrasive, even compared to their 80s thrashy stuff. Real sharp guitar tone, very aggressive sounding. I dig those Bathory style bar chords. Vocals on this are sick too. He's about to bust out some dank fucking King Diamond shit for your ear hole. So this melody right here is going to become important, and as you can plainly hear, it has a sense of melodic fluidity to it that gives off a very space rock sort of feeling, and works as a great jumping off point for this extended guitar solo freak out over that very quick walking bass line. Real interesting stuff. This is the second to last song on the album. The last song on the album fades in directly afterwards. And it's sort of an extended, spacey meditation on that melody I pointed out earlier. Very much reaching back to the Mark of the Beast days. The much more chilled out drumming, the relaxed guitar playing, and even the incorporation of some not traditional for rock instrumentation in the form of a violin.
Awesome! He's fucking rock, dude! Yeah!
The violin is actually played by Mark Shelton's mother, lovingly dubbed Mama Don, after the song Megalodon, which came out on the first Manilla Road reunion album, Atlantis Rising, because, you know, he's Mark the Shark Shelton. It's a little inside joke there for people.
You are correct, sir.
So there you go, that's Manilla Road as a space rock band. Hopefully you enjoyed learning about this underappreciated aspect of one of metal's greatest band sound. But even if you didn't, thanks for watching or listening or whatever you did, and I'll see you next time. Bye.
I hope you've been showing your pussy tonight, baby, because I will be wanking my cock.